Okay, we are back at the Holden Arboretum. Big surprise. It's early in the morning. I don't know, maybe about 8:14, and we're going for an early morning walk, which I haven't been able to do for a while. So I'm kind of happy about that. It's been a lot of complications, a lot of things happening that have gotten in the way of me sort of coming out early in the morning. And this is actually what we're looking at now is kind of interesting. This is called Woven Landscapes, I believe, and it's some sort of artistic display that they have here, which actually I'll take us around. Look at this. They sometimes have these, I don't know what you call them, like artistic, like every year at Holden they sometimes have like different like stick sculptures or sort of some different things like that. Let's take a look at this. I don't think I really ever, this is the foodie garden. Different herbs and plants and things that I don't often stop, I guess, maybe not stop enough to show some of what's here. I mean, anyone in the area can come here. It's a great place. Definitely recommend coming to a place like this. There's no substitute for doing things yourself. I mean, that's the whole problem with this, even me doing these videos, is watching someone walk and think and talk and observe and inquire is not the same thing as doing it yourself. It's very different. And in fact, the problem is that we get so used to wanting other people or watching other people do things, for one. I always kind of found, like, you know, not to offend anyone, but like, you know, the people that watch other people play games, play video games, something I never quite understood. You know, as opposed to playing the video games yourself, you watch other people play video games. And I guess it's just a thing, right? It's an entertainment or whatever. But it's just, I've seen certain things like that that just make you feel like, I don't know, people tend to get more far removed from living their life versus watching other people live their life. And as social media has picked up, I think so much of what it is these days is watching other people, these influencers, if you want to lump them all in that category, living their life, and then spending so much time watching them live their life, you know, and instead of just getting out on your own, you know, go out, do your own thing, live your own life, and spend less time watching other people live theirs. We've just become a very a watcher society, you know, as opposed to a doer society, if I can generalize. And even before that, it's just the newest craze, right? I mean, we've had phases like this before. I think when I was growing up, it was like watching TV all the time. Like that was it's like, get outside, don't sit in front of the boob tube or whatever was the nickname that we used to call it, and get outside and do things. And I'm as guilty as everyone else. I had shows I like to watch, not as much. I mean, Saturday morning cartoons, Star Trek, you know, I loved Star Trek, watching that. But it, you know, it would come on at a certain time, you know, Fridays at some, can't remember when exactly now, but you know, these things happen, and then you watch the show, and then you get on with your life after that. So it was more scheduled, I guess, than now. It's like you have access to entertainment almost continuously, and so there's no end to the, you know, it's not like I have to be home at 6 o'clock to watch a show. It's like I could watch it at any time. It's accessible to you, you know, and I think that can be a problem because you have things that can occupy yourself like continuously, instead of getting outside into nature and losing our relationship with nature, I think, is one of the worst things we can do. And I think when we do that, our society crumbles. I mean, as if it's not already crumbling for many various reasons. I think that, if we lose our relationship with nature, we lose our relationship with humanity. And, I mean, I think we see it happening. And I think it's been happening. Not that we didn't have problems before all this, right? I mean, it's not the only reason. It's not the only cause. You don't pin things down on one thing and say, well, this is the cause, of all of humanity's problems. It contributes to it. And I think there's been a steady decline over centuries, maybe. I mean, decades for sure, in various ways, for various reasons. And even though technology has accelerated, I would say our society has been declining, in many ways. We might want to think that there's certain things that have advanced, but we psychologically, or we're sort of the same as we were when we were living in tribes, and I don't know. Nationalism now is just sort of glorified tribalism. It's the same thing, just on a larger scale. And now our weapons are bigger. It's just kind of funny how we haven't really fundamentally changed. We've stayed the same. The same, like, I would say, anachronistic ways in which we America first, or whatever we'd say now, which is just silly, because it should be humanity first, not America first. I mean, we're all human beings. We share this planet. These boundaries that we create between nations are artificial, and between races, and between everything else, which I've talked about before endlessly. But this division is what causes all of our conflict. If there were no dividing lines between nations, who would be fighting against each other? Like, it's because you can say there's an us and a them. The minute you say there's an us and a them, you create division, and then you create conflict between the parts you've just created. If you see that those divisions are not real, right? They're constructs of the mind. All creations of the mind. 100%. There's no line on the ground that separates one country from another. It's in a map, and it's in the mind. And if we just saw ourselves as a global family, a global tribe, so to speak, but not even a tribe, but just, there was more of an understanding of that relationship that we all have with each other, not as separate entities, but as common human beings. There's more similarities with all of us than there are differences, but we forget that. We don't see that. And because of that, we fight these ridiculous wars. Like, it's insane what's happening right now in the world. The wars that we're fighting, and it's like, why is this happening? To me, it's so absurd. Because if you don't divide yourself up this way, and you just see your neighbors as your brothers, right, as your sisters, you don't fight over these things. It's because of ideas that we fight. We fight for ideas. And this is going to be our downfall. If there isn't a transformation of human consciousness, all this fighting, all this division, and just animosity, like, how does it make sense to think, oh, we can win, like, as a nation, and then somehow, what's going to happen? Like, what are you going to do? Pound that other country into oblivion? And then what? What does that do for you? Like, it's insane when you think about it. It purely is insanity. It's not accomplishing anything. And if we simply were more united, as a humanity, and found ways, we could be solving problems like world hunger, and everyone would have food to eat, and we could be progressing as humanity, not as individual nations fighting against each other, trying to outdo everyone else. I mean, that is, it's like I've never, in my life, I've never even sort of felt like this desire to compete. You know, I've never particularly been interested in that, or even grades in school and all these other ways of measuring people. Never appealed to me. I always never quite understood, why do we artificially create like teams, then we have those teams fight against each other, and then you have a winner and a loser. So many people take that for granted, that that's natural, that that's the way it should be. But I've always said, to me, it's like an example of how we've just continued, even athletics, it's like a continuation of this warring nature that we have, to have my team, your team, my tribe, your tribe, and to act out violence and aggression in another way. Instead of maybe killing each other on a battlefield, you know, we now all play football or soccer or whatever it is. But the same, it's like there may not be bloodletting, but the aggression is still there, that I need to win at your expense. I need to succeed at your failure. You know, and why do we do that? Why don't both teams just work together? You know, if both teams work together, like, there would be no conflict, there'd be no stress, there would be no, like, they would just, like, what's the common objective? Let's find a problem and solve it together, and not be at each other's throats. I just don't quite understand it. And so I've never really participated in sports, except at a really young age, playing a Little League. And even that was not really just something I ended up doing. But as I aged, I would say it just fell out of favor. So, yeah, I guess this whole idea of competition never made sense to me. And now that it's more clear to me that division creates conflict in the world, right? And this is, you could call this an insight, because it's not something you argue, it's not something you prove, it's something you see as true. You see it as true. You don't need it to be proven to you. It's a fact, right? And I guess that's, you could regard insight as the seeing of a fact. And it's not something, a fact isn't something that's proven, right? A fact is something you observe. You observe the sun. You don't have to prove the sun. You don't argue over whether the sun exists or doesn't exist, or whether it rises in the morning. It's a fact. And understanding the difference between facts and beliefs, and in this case, it's a fact. As far as I'm concerned, it's as clear in my mind as anything that division creates conflict, right? And so it's not something, to me, it's not an arguable point, because you can't have two things fighting each other if you don't have two things to begin with, right? If you have one thing, that one thing doesn't fight against itself. It's only when you have two or more things that they can interact, right? There can be forces between them, there can be conflict between them. When you identify two things, if one thing is one thing doesn't fight, it's just an obvious fact. That anytime, think of conflict. Is there ever conflict without division? It's another way to look at it. How can there be conflict without parts, right? I mean, a team in athletics, you have two teams. You divide people into two teams, and those two teams fight, right? In politics, you have different political parties. Those different political parties fight. In nations, because you have different nations, they fight. And there's less infighting, right? within a country itself, if those people all see themselves as part of that same country, that same society, there's no conflict. Now there can be conflict, right? Like the Civil War in the United States, because the North and the South, though, once again, divided themselves. And, you know, it reminds me of the united we stand, divided we fall statement, which is very true, because when there's division, those parts, inevitably, there's conflict between the parts. So it's a truism, as far as I'm concerned, that division and conflict are equivalent. When you divide in any way, it's almost, there's conflict in the very division. The very division means the very act of dividing is almost an act of aggression. Because you're saying, this is, you know, there's something about me that separates me from you. And I need to call myself one thing and you something else. And that division is an expression of aggression, in a way, right? Rather than saying, you and I are the same, not saying it, knowing it, you know, understanding it at a deep, visceral level, that we are not different, right? That all human beings come from the same source, if you want to say it that way, the same origin, that we are not like my body, my mind. I didn't create this. I didn't create my body and mind. It came from nature, just like every other human body and mind came from nature, and that we have evolved over, you know, thousands, millions of years to be where we are now. The human mind has evolved, and the human mind is essentially the same in every person, you know, with superficial differences, very small differences between us, but we share that same evolved human mind. And if you see that, right, and you can see that even just through science, you know, what we understand about evolution, that we have evolved together, all human beings on this planet. It's not my consciousness and your consciousness, it's human consciousness. It's the same. You know, it's like we're united in that way. We not just share, we are the same consciousness. But we don't see that when we mentally divide ourselves into different individuals. And it is a psychological division, not a real division. This is why it's important to see the difference between facts and beliefs, right? It's a belief that divides us. The mind constructs ideas, and those ideas give us the idea of separation, the idea of being a unique individual, which makes no sense, really. How are you an individual? Like, your body, your mind, it follows a certain biological pattern that is the same for everyone. So you are just an instance of the same human being. You're not different, right? And if you see that you are the world, right? And the world is you. To have the insight to understand that, not as words, because you can hear that statement and say, I kind of see it, but I'm still me. You know, I have my own desires, my own wishes, my own fears and whatnot, but then you don't realize everyone else does too. Like, you're not seeing that what you think is unique to you is not unique to you. Everyone has fears, shares, has desires, has you know, pleasure or whatever, and is seeking security for themselves, for their family, for their tribe. And what's funny is to just see the commonality that we all share that, from, you know, the poorest person that may live in the smallest village in India or China or someplace, or even here in the United States or Africa or any place, to a person that, you know, we might consider, I'll say Elon Musk or whoever, right? Pick some elevated person, someone that has elevated financial and social status. They're the same. They share the same human body, the same human mind, with small, superficial deviations. But fundamentally, we all get afraid. We all have fear of dying, fear of many things, fear of insecurity. We all have beliefs. The beliefs may vary, but having beliefs of any kind, like creating ideas, like this idea creation factory that our brain is, like that's common to all human beings. And this is why seeing that is an insight. When you see that wholly and completely, not as words that someone says, but when that clicks. Hi. So yeah, when that clicks as a fundamental truth, not as an idea to be tested, or, well, what you say might be true, I'll think about it, you know, I'll decide whether that's true or not, I'll evaluate the truthness of your statement, just means you're not observing, right? You're not observing carefully enough, you're not observing closely enough, because something that is a fact that can be observed, there is no debate about. There is no decision. There is no, well, if the evidence leads me in that direction, I'll believe what you're telling me. You're simply not seeing it, right? So the key is not to argue, not to analyze, not to, it's to open your eyes and see the truth in front of you as a fact, because truth and facts are the same, right? What is true is a fact. That is the only thing that's true, are facts. Well, what are facts, you know? And the problem is, if you go down that path of now defining facts, like what is a fact, you also have to understand what a fact is fundamentally by observing again. What is true? You could say a fact is what is true, right? Or what is true is a fact. You know, it could go either way. How do you determine any of these things? And not analytically, not through causal relationships or evidentiary process or analytical, you know, systems or methods. That is not how one observes truth. That's how one develops beliefs. Beliefs arise through, you know, the construction of causal relationships. Right? We can say that the world behaves, that the physical world has causal relationships, which allows us to understand how things work to a very limited extent, to a partial extent. We can focus our attention on one thing and understand its relationship to everything, and, you know, learn about that thing. And that process allows us to create technology that allows us to have cars and vehicles and other such things, like the one that just passed. But that it's only partial understanding, partial knowledge, and it's not truth, in the sense that truth is an understanding of facts, an observation, direct perception of fact, not something you arrive at through a process of time. And that's something that has to be understood. And again, we can explain that, but it doesn't, there's no explanation that's going to come. You don't need to be convinced. Just open your eyes. Open your eyes and observe. What you're observing directly are the facts. What you are sensing directly, without interpretation, are facts, right? And to understand what you are observing and what's happening, like to know what's happening, because truth and facts are also what is happening now and what has happened, right? But what is happening now is the closest to the truth, because it doesn't require memory, it doesn't require interpretation, it doesn't require perception, like deciding what that thing is, because that is the process of pulling the past in. You know, seeing something and saying that's a tree requires that you have a memory of a tree and what it is, and then you're mapping your memory to what you're seeing. And that once you're in that realm, thought has arisen. You're out of the direct perception and you're into the thinking process, which is why it's so hard for us to understand what direct perception is, because we don't rarely directly perceive without that thought process interfering. And what's interesting is how does one see then directly, right? The natural question is then, what is direct perception? How does one directly perceive? And it's not how does one directly perceive, it's see how you perceive now. See the process of thought that is occurring now. Don't try to break out of thought. Don't try to not think, because you won't. That's an achievement. It's like you're trying to achieve something, which thought is the reason that you're trying to achieve something. So you can't get out of thinking by thinking. And there's another, just a truism, right? It's just something that you see, that like any process of thought cannot allow you to break out of the process of thought. It's common sense, right? It's the words even express that. But even when you hear those words, right, if it doesn't hit you at that deepest level as a true insight, then you're still stuck. And you'll just move around from one thought system to another, one belief system to another, one ideology to another. They all need to end. Right? But how do they end? You don't end them. You observe them. You observe what's happening. And in that observation, truth emerges. The truth that all these belief systems come from thought and thinking. And that if you know, to transcend thought, to move beyond this world of ideas that we live in. And that's the problem. We don't live in the real world, the true world. We live in a world of ideas, constantly, you know, creating ideas, translating everything we see, hear, feel, taste, touch, sense in any way into ideas. Like, oh, I recognize that thing, I smell, I know what that smell is, it's this, that that form of perception, which is not direct perception, because it is association of what's happening now with the past, with the old. So then you never see anything new that way, because everything you see is translated into something you've seen before, which is the past, which is old. So as long as you are still in that process of mapping what you see to ideas, you never see what newness is. And newness is in every is constantly, like creation is always occurring. But if you always map it to the past, you are not in that moment seeing what is here and now as something new and unique that has never been before. That is direct observation of the present moment. To recognize that there will never be a moment like this moment. Maybe you may think it's similar to say what happened yesterday and say, I'm familiar with that bridge, I'm familiar with everything. But if you were to observe deeply enough, you'd see this bridge today is not the same as the bridge yesterday. And there may be sticks laying on it that weren't there yesterday. There may be moisture that's accumulated. There may be, you know, the wood itself is decaying at a very slow rate. But when you perceive that whole process and look deeply, nothing is ever the same. And that's why, like, to me, even when I come here maybe every single day, and I guess when I started this channel, I alluded to possibly going to different places, which is much more difficult for me given that during the week, I have to get back to work, you know, and I will after this walk. And so I can't go somewhere that's that far away. On the weekend I can, but, you know, even to me, every day I come here, I see the differences between the previous day. And I don't need to compare it to the previous day. right? I don't need to say, well, what is different? It's like, just the seeing of what is happening now is always new. You don't have to compare it to the past. You don't have to identify the differences, right? That's another thing. You don't have to say, well, let me find out what's new here today and start analyzing, because see, that's the process of thought and the process of analysis. When you simply see that every moment is new, it doesn't require you to identify what is new. It is new. I mean, everything is new. You are new in every moment. And to see that you are not the same as yesterday in one way, and the other way, there's a continuity, but there's not a continuity, at the same time. There's a continuity, a continuation, but you're never the same. And to see that what you are now is different and the same, but again, not in that analytical process. It's so easy for analysis to come in and say, well, let me examine the differences between who I am today and who I was yesterday, and start writing it down and, cataloging it, and then saying, you're correct, I see. Or maybe you don't come to that conclusion. You say, I don't see any difference between myself today and myself yesterday. And you're missing the whole perception. You're missing the whole insight in that way, because again, this is a truth. The truth doesn't need evidence to support it. What is true requires no evidence. This is the difference. It is evidence, right? Truth is evidence. It is that observation itself, which is another way to look at truth. It's the evidence, right? Even in science, we collect data, and then we formulate theories from that data. But the truth is the data itself, which is the observation. What's not true is the theory you develop about it. The theory may be useful, the model may be useful, but it is not the reality. It reminds me of something, even in my field of study, where it says all models are wrong, but some models are useful. And that is an important insight to have, even if you work in the areas of mathematics and mathematical modeling that I do, because you understand that every model is an approximation of reality, not reality itself. That's the fundamental realization. Then when you realize, though, we create mental models of everything, right? So it's not just mathematical models. We have mental models of everything, the same. And you could say the same thing. All those mental models are wrong, but some of them are useful. It's a way to look at the thinking process itself as modeling reality in concepts and ideas, which is what we tend to do. And in certain ways that allows us to survive. We learn what's the poisonous berry. We learn certain things, but there is an intelligence that goes beyond. The body has its own intelligence, and in that body intelligence, that whole intelligence, it doesn't require limited knowledge, right? The body knows what to do. It's doing things now you don't even comprehend what it's doing. You, being that limited set of memories, that bundle of memories in the brain, which is not the whole. You are not the whole body. You are just a collection of thoughts, of memories. And you have this pattern of memories in the brain that creates an identity that sees itself as even separate from the body. Right? That's the trick that the mind and the brain play, is that they give you this impression that you are separate from the body. And I hear certain people, they say there's certain mantras, I am not this body, I am not this mind, I am not, this consciousness, and you are. Sorry, but maybe the reason you're repeating it is because it's not true, and you don't see the truth, or want to see the truth, that you are a body that will decay and die. You are a brain that will decay and die. You are a temporary phenomenon, a temporary combination of chemicals and processes that forms patterns in memory that persist in the brain for a period of time and then are gone. And you don't want to accept that. So you want to repeat to yourself that you are not the body, you are not the mind. Well, what are you then, if you are not these things? So then we create these imaginary concepts, again, created by the brain, the very brain that we want to transcend. But then the brain creates a concept of a, say, an eternal soul, right? Something that persists beyond the body and mind. And I know this is a touchy subject, right? Because so many people believe in this and have accepted this as being true, but have you ever examined it? Have you ever really examined it? And you know, the thought of examine that right now when I ask that question. Does it create fear in you? When I say examine this idea of the soul, don't take it for granted. Don't accept it as being fact. Say, well, you know, maybe it's not. And when you know, even the possibility that that may not be true, right? You probably have instilled within yourself a belief so strong in something like, say, the soul, that you persist, that you will continue, that you will not perish with the body, with the ending of this organism, that you somehow continue. You may be reborn in another body, like the idea that you as an individual will persist. I'm not talking about mass and energy. We all know that persists in an amorphous form, not in the pattern that you are right now, though, that you exist. Your matter and energy will go on. The matter and energy that you're composed of, you are constantly exchanging matter and energy with the environment. So you are not even you right now. You are a constantly changing entity, which is what you need to see. There's not even a static you that exists. Your body's constantly changing, constantly breathing in and out, eating, and you know, removing waste, and I mean, receiving energy from the sun, I mean, and then expelling energy and water evaporating from your body. I mean, you're constantly interacting with the environment in such a way that how do you even decide what's you? You'd have to draw a line around you, right? Create an artificial boundary to even say, this is my body. Because your body really is embedded within a larger body, the Earth's body. You know, the atmosphere that surrounds you, the sunlight that comes in, you can't be taken out of that system. You would perish. You can't be separated from everything else. That's another thing to see. It's back to that idea of division. You can't be divided as a separate entity. How could you be separate from everything else? If you just closed yourself off from everything, you would die. The body would perish. You would receive no heat. You would receive no moisture, no air. Your body, in order for your body to continue functioning, it must be embedded within this larger system. This is science. It's not that hard. So even then, the recognition that there is this continual flux of mass and energy through everything, like that everything is exchanging. I mean, the trees are, you know, releasing carbon dioxide or accepting carbon dioxide. You know, I am releasing it. I am taking in oxygen. It's like there's a symbiosis between all living things. That if we see that, well, then we stop seeing ourselves as these individualistic people fighting against nature. We are part of this whole process of nature, this whole planet that could be referred to as Gaia, right? Some people have come up with that name, but again, that's a concept. We don't need the concept. We just need to see what's fact right in front of us. Me walking through here right now is a clear, like, this is why being in nature, right? Because you see the truth of you being a fundamental part of nature, not a separate part of nature. Not something that's fighting against nature, but something that is nature. But just to get back to the idea of this, we may have this idea of this eternal soul. But when you get down to it, where is that? What is that, right? Other than a concept that someone has told you and said, you are this eternal thing that persists and you will go on, either be reborn or you will go to heaven or some good place. I mean, do you ever break that down and question it? Because that's all you need to do to see that the truth, what you see with your eyes and ears and your senses, does not comport with that concept. That doesn't mean, though, there is truth, right? What is truth, right? Truth is, so the first thing to recognize is that, say, for example, this idea of the soul, that it is an idea, right? Let's not argue the truthhood or falsehood of a soul. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but it's not a fact. And that's what you need to see, Because when you start getting back to the facts, right, what are the facts? What is it you observe? What is it you see directly? Not the soul. You don't see that directly. You don't observe that directly. Where does that, it's a notion, it's an idea, and not everyone shares that idea. And that's the other thing about a fact. A fact is something that there's no disagreement on, right? A person may disagree, may have their alternative facts, right? But that's only because they're not seeing or observing directly. Their fact is not the fact. If they really observed, they would see the fact the same as everyone else sees the fact. You know, a fact is something that can be agreed upon, right? If you have 5 people standing here and they all see this tree, everyone agrees there's a tree here. Maybe one person, if he's insane or mentally disturbed, would say, no, I don't see the tree. And okay, but that's because he's living in a world of ideas. He is furthest from seeing fact and truth, right? So those that see truth see the common truth. There is not my truth and your truth. There is just truth. It's universal. It is the same because it is not based on perception. It is not based on my ideas of truth. So things that are based on ideas are not true. They are just beliefs. They are creations of the mind. So the idea of a soul or any reincarnation, all of this are simply ideas, not reality, not truth. Well, it is reality in the sense that it becomes a person's reality, but it is not truth. And I've said this before, to distinguish between reality and truth. People can live in their own self-created reality, or community-created reality, right? Every religious community has a reality. They have an agreed-upon set of common beliefs. And this is also why often you'll find people join communities, because it's like a ready-made reality for you, right? If you become a Christian, there's an entire belief system that has been created for you over thousands of years, that if you join it, now you feel like you belong to something. You belong to this belief system that has a certain security and comfort to it, right? Because they provide you with an explanation for certain aspects of the world that you really should be figuring out on your own, not taking anyone's word for it. Not taking anyone's word for even the idea of a soul. Like, would you have developed that idea on your own if you had never encountered somebody else who told you that there was such a thing as a soul? You may eventually come up with an idea, but I don't think it'd be the first thing that, if you had no prior conception of a soul, you would simply be in the moment observing what's happening to you, surviving in a world and interacting with that world in a very direct way, and not concerning yourself with what happens at the end or when you pass away or when this organism, like, obviously these ideas came about from people seeing things like death, seeing the end of things and saying, I wish those things didn't end. But I wonder when that happened, because for the most part, I would think people, for probably a very long period of time, accepted the fact that things end. I mean, you see it in everything else. Plants are born and die. They end when you eat them, or become part of you, when you eat them. Or, animals live and die, and the seasons come and go. The world is filled with cycles of things that begin and end. But we don't want that to apply to us. We want to see ourselves as somehow special, separate from everything else, which is another fallacy. Not true. We are not separate. We just talked about how interconnected we are with everything in nature. We couldn't survive without that interconnectedness with nature. So on one hand, it's just an obvious fact. You open your eyes and you observe how connected you are with everything, that you are not a separate thing. But then you want to say, well, we're special, right, in some way. And a lot of times this is what religion does for us, as the traditional religions. They say, you're special. You're the master of the animals. You're the caretaker of the planet or whatever. Somehow you have a special job or position in the scheme of things, rather than seeing ourselves as part of this natural process, which we are, and not the controllers of it, not the masters of it. We are not the masters of nature. Every time there's a hurricane and a flood and a terrible tragedy, it's a reminder of how small we actually are in the grand scheme of things. The earth, we are not masters of the earth. We may destroy the earth, through our ignorance of that, and our lack of understanding, thinking we know more than the earth itself, and in that process destroying the earth. But that's a separate matter that we could discuss. Not what we're talking about now. So just getting back to this idea of identity, this idea of an eternal soul, when you just start seeing things directly, question everything, right? Question everything intelligently, right? Not question everything, not, not believe anything, like not, there's a healthy, constructive process of analysis, right? To find what is true and what is not true, because there is truth. It's not to say that there isn't true. There isn't something true. There is. But you don't find it by believing in anyone else's idea of truth. You have to observe it on your own, directly. It's the only way. There's no explanation of truth, right? This is what we get caught into, right? That you have to see the truth directly, not me telling you about the truth, which is why the truth cannot be expressed in words. The truth is what's happening. How can you express what's happening in words? It's limited. You can't just, it's impossible. See what's happening. See what is happening right now wholly, not a part, not focusing on one part of what's happening, all of what is happening. That entirety of what is happening is truth. And you can only observe it. You can't write it down. There's no capturing of it. There's no explaining of it. There's no system of thought that, organizes the truth. It's so simple. Like, it is the simplest thing, right? What's complicated are the systems of ideas that we create and develop. That's complicated. The truth is simple. It's why it's so hard for us to see truth directly. But it's just a casting away of everything else, and then that is where truth lives. Behind it all, outside the world of ideas that we live in, that we have created, which is such a limited little world, that beyond that limitation is this truth that doesn't require you to know anything, to learn anything, to hear anything from anybody. It doesn't require you to sit still and meditate, to learn truth. There's a quietness that, when the mind is filled with thoughts and other problems, right, that's why we don't see it. So the mind has to be quiet, right? But the mind will naturally become quiet if you're interested, if you have an interest in knowing the truth. The mind becomes quiet. When you're interested, you're in a class and you're paying attention to the professor or whoever it is, right? You're not talking while they're talking. You're listening because you want to learn something. You want to know something. There's an interest. When you care, so there's a process of caring that has to be involved, because when you care, you naturally listen. So in the same way that when you're in a class and, no one tells you how to listen, right? No one has to teach you how to listen. What has to stop is all the distractions that keep you from listening. Listening is what occurs naturally when you're not full of distractions. So this is why you don't teach yourself listening. You don't, and in the same way, why meditation, a lot of people believe, again, it's a belief, that practicing certain meditative techniques or methods will allow you to see truth. But that's not true. And that's a very big not true, because most of the world believes that. So it's very difficult to say something that goes against perhaps the majority of the world's thinking. But this is why, I guess, look at it this way. If the world is messed up right now and screwed up, doesn't it make sense that most people are wrong? That most people are living in this world of ideas. So by the very nature, you can't judge right and wrong in some sense by what most people do. That's not it. You have to see right and wrong for yourself through truth, right? See truth directly, not through the lens of the past. And most people in this world have a tradition, have a culture that they come from, that they adhere to, or they jump from their culture to another culture. It doesn't matter though. Those are all past cultures, whether it's your culture or someone else's culture that you've come upon and like better than your present culture. It's still a culture. So truth isn't jumping around from culture to culture, going to Japan or China or Tibet, to seek truth. Truth is around you now. You don't need to go anywhere to find it. Right? And in fact, you hurt yourself that way, because now you turn it into a process of time which is not necessary. And we've talked about this before. To see, you just need to open your eyes. No one teaches you how to see. The organ of sight is there. It occurs naturally. In the same way, there is a natural intelligence. That is there when the distractions that prevent that intelligence from arising are removed. Right? We could call that the awakening of intelligence. Is true intelligence, not the cunning intelligence that is skill, the learning of a skill. This process of learning, which is a process of time, is not this intelligence. This intelligence is you could call it a cosmic intelligence or a universal intelligence. The intelligence of the body, the natural intelligence of the universe that just is. It's not a learned thing. It is the intelligence of everything that is there all the time, that you are that intelligence. But you cloud it with your beliefs and your ideas and your practices, meditative or otherwise. And there is meditation, but meditation is like the removal of all that. It's the elimination, the clearing of the content of consciousness that is preventing you from seeing truth directly. So it is not a process of doing something. It is a process of not doing things. It is a process of not having any practice, not having any belief system, which is not a process itself. The understanding of these things for what they are is not a process. It is insight and understanding. It's not a thing of time. Once you understand that all belief systems created by thought are the same, they all fall by the wayside. You stop seeking one belief system, one practice, whatever it is. It's done. So then you're left with something else, right? And what you're left with is not a concept. It's once all concepts are stopped, the truth is there, uncorrupted, and it simply is. And then you, just like opening your eyes, you just have to see what's there, observe what's there, not be taught how to observe what's there. There is no teaching to observe truth at its fundamental level, right? It simply is what's there when everything else has been dropped, when all the concepts of the mind, which is very hard to do because we live in that conceptual universe. It's like the Marvel universe. We live in this universe of ideas, and which is actually a great analogy, because in the same way that we create other universes, like the Marvel universe, multiverse, right? More than one universe. It's a fun you can play with things like that if you see what it is. Like, that is an artificial creation. If you see that the same way in which we create these Marvel multiverses is the same way that we create the universe we live in every day. It's our natural process to create universes of ideas. But there is one real universe, true universe, right, that is not manufactured out of ideas. To see that universe, you can't see it through the lens of the past, through the lens of ideas. It's to open your eyes to what is there right now. Because this universe that is here now has never been. Right? The truth is a living thing. truth is always there. I was going to say changing. It's not changing, but it is manifesting in different ways. But the underlying truth is the same. But it's not found by examining the so-called truth of the past. That is over. The past is dead. The past is a dead thing. Knowledge is a dead thing. Your memories are dead things. Dead things cannot describe a living thing. The only thing that is living is now. What is happening now, the present, is living. The past is dead. And the future hasn't come. Doesn't make those are ideas. And in that sense, there is only now. The past and future are now. They are the same. And then seeing that, what is time, and how we perceive, how we separate time. Again, separation, division causes conflict. Separating the past. This little bee on this flower here. Separating past, present, and future, again, is another separation that the mind creates, that gets in the way of seeing what is true. What is true? Is the past true? Is the future true? Is the present true? And again, don't say that in words. See what is. There's nothing more than that. And in the seeing what is, all the clutter and all the contents of consciousness just fade away, because you see that what is not that. It is not the memories. It is not the past. It is what is happening now, which is not what happened 5 minutes ago. You know, it's now. And these words have been tossed around, you know, now, and, you know, we could talk about the present, being in the present moment. And I mean, these phrases have been used in other systems and, you know, methods prescribed to be present in the now and all that. So you have to be very careful, because all these words just evoke, you know, trigger memories of other things that have been said about these things. This is why you have to get beyond the words, because the words will just trigger more words. The words are just, and this is what's difficult, right? Because all words are ideas and concepts. So how there's no collection of words that can describe the ineffable, what can't be described by words. There is no set of words that can describe truth. There's no set of words that, it's just not of words. So how is truth without words, right? That's something that can't be explained in words. But it is something that, like, through discussing it, we can perhaps come to the realization that words are not the way. And then the words need to end. And then, not that you need to end them, because that requires an ender, you know, an entity to end. And that just reinforces that identity that needs to end. And the identity, it's like you can't end the identity yourself. The identity needs to end, the sense of your own ego, your own sense of self, but it's not something you can do. You know, it's similar in a sense, perhaps, to this Christian concept of grace, but I don't want to bring that in, because again, that's another concept. But the fact that you are not ending it, but it needs to end. So, you know, not that you need to set yourself into this quandary of, well, how do I end something that I can't end? Or how does something end that I can't end? And it's like, don't try to end it. Observe what you are doing. Observe the process of thought that is getting in the way of ending. Don't try to end, because that implies developing a process for ending. How do I end thought? You don't end thought through any process, through any method, because any method or process is of thought. But see that truth. See the truth that there is no ending of thought through any process or method, because that process or method is itself thought. So you can't end thought with something from thought. See the truth of that statement. Then there's an ending of trying to end thought through any method or process, right? So that you may not know what to do, but you can know what not to do. And this is by perhaps through the negative, knowing what isn't the truth, what not to do, what is false. What is false are all the methods, belief systems, ideologies, practices, everything anyone has ever told you is false, is not going to end thought. That is not the way. There is no way. Because a way, or no path, there's no path to truth. Because any path would require something static, like if you're a clearing in the woods is a static place. In order to have a path to that clearing, that clearing can't move around. It has to stay put in one place. Truth doesn't stay put. Truth is constantly moving, constantly alive. It is what is living. It is life itself, is truth. So there's no path to what is constantly moving, right? And that's why there's no path to truth, because truth is a living thing. Living things move, change, evolve. Not that truth, again, there's no description, but you just can clearly see that concept of truth, right, is not truth. So, I mean, I guess I don't know what the point of even talking about this is. It's beyond all this, and I guess maybe it's good if no one ever does listen to this, because this is probably only confusing people even more, because it's just so simple. And really, me talking now about all this is just making it more complicated than it is. But maybe it's pointing out just the complications, right? Not the questioning, the inquiry that needs to happen in order for truth to emerge, right? Is the dropping of everything else that isn't truth, which is really just all over our ideas, our idea space, our universes of ideas, the multiverse of ideas that we have created and constructed in our mind. And to see that, doesn't matter what culture you're from, what belief system you belong to, it's all the same. What religion you belong to, it's all the same. What philosophy you adhere to. Once you see that these are all creations of thought, and then you see the limitations of thought, it all ends. You're done. You're done with thought trying to find truth, right? That is the realization, right? Is just that thought is not the way. So you may not know the way. I don't know. It's unknown, right? This is the unknown that we're talking about, that cannot be known through any process of the known. You can't know the unknown through known. And so there has to be an ending of the known, the ending of which is all the knowledge that we have accumulated, the cruft in our mind, in our brain, that prevents the truth in its simplest way from being seen. So don't try to find truth, just observe everything. Observe yourself, observe your thought processes, observe your relationships with people, with nature, with everything. Observe what is happening now, and through that observation you will see the process of thought. That it is all of your action now is driven by thought. And then you say, is there an action that is not driven by thought? But you don't need to imagine what that action not driven by thought is. Just see that all your action now is derived by thought of one kind or another. And then examine that. Examine it all. Not examine, not piece. Observe it all with purity and clarity, without the past, without the fearing. That's all. And again, that's, I talk about this endlessly, and it seems sort of pointless to talk about it. And I don't, it's like, here I am, I'm walking through the park, I'm enjoying that. This is enjoyable to me. And, it's like it's this, you know, you want to share the enjoyment, but the enjoyment is the ease of not wanting to be anywhere else or do anything else, but just being here and enjoying the existing at the moment, and that this day, this time will never be again, and seeing this day as, you know, the precious thing that it is, and not worrying about tomorrow and what tomorrow may bring, full of uncertainty. Tomorrow is an uncertain thing. The only certainty we have is now. You know, and we build our life, you know, being afraid of the future. And we do so many things to try to mitigate the uncertainty of the future, which we have no concept of. No, we can't predict the future. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, 10 minutes from now. An asteroid could hit while I'm recording this, and that's the end. And I can't predict that. That is just the universal nature of things, that things can happen at any minute, at any time. In the so-called future, which is always the now, but it is not something I can worry about or predict. But we spend so much of our time trying to do that, trying to lay out our life in an orderly fashion, predict, you know, what's going to happen this week, tomorrow, next year, and, you know, plan our life out as if it's something that can be planned. And this is why we can't lose the spontaneity of the moment, to let things come to us naturally rather than us planning out every aspect of our life. For what purpose to do that? You know, what's the purpose of planning everything? You know, and planning to an extent is necessary, but when you over plan, when everything in your life is constructed, what are you trying to do? You know, live a mechanical life? Live a life where there's nothing new? Where every day you don't discover anything because you don't put yourself out there to discover anything. You know, when I'm walking, I don't know what I'm going to see. I mean, I'm going to see what I see. I don't plan what I see. You know, I may plan to come here, but I don't plan what I see once I come here. It's a new day. Every sight that I see is new. Every plant that I see, yellow, red, purple, yellow, white. I mean, I see all sorts of colors and trees. I mean, that I've never seen before. It's all new. And I never will see again. And that newness is what is fascinating, that you don't see if you plan everything out. You don't see that newness, because that newness comes to you when you're not doing your over planning. So you have to have space, right? This is freedom and space. Freedom from planning, space from your planned, organized life. Like, there has to be empty space or nothing new can be added, right? A glass has to be empty before you can put anything in the glass. And this is like the emptiness of things, is that to be empty, and then you can receive, right? You can receive what's new when you clear out the old. And it's why I love coming here every day, and it doesn't matter to me that I come to the same place every day. I mean, I have promised, and I do need to go to different places, and I have an idea, a plan. I have a plan for going somewhere new. Maybe this weekend will be a good time to do it. See, I love just being here right now, like this space and this openness. And see, not a lot of people come this way. Most people follow that path down there. It's gravel. It goes around Corning Lake. I think it's what people think they're supposed to do. I don't think a lot of people realize you can walk off the trail. You don't have to stay on that path the whole way around. I love walking that path, nothing against it. But I also love this, coming off the path, stepping away from that mechanical process and coming out here. This is still a path. I mean, it's still a mode path, so maybe I'm being a little melodramatic about it. But it's a different path. And, you see so much more from out here. It's more empty. You know, there's not as much planning out here. There's not as much structure. This is more nature on its own terms here. The trees and plants are just, you know, doing what they're doing. So, all right, I feel like that might be enough for today, and I'm gonna keep walking for a while and then get back to work. So have a good day, and it looks like we're coming in right under an hour, which is good. Okay, have a good